USPAP page 268. Appraisal development and scope of work issues continued. Question 1. If the agency's scope of work seems appropriate, do I need to state somewhere in my report that the scope of work was developed by the agency with my concurrence? Question number 2. Assume that I believe the agency's scope of work is inappropriate or inadequate. I discuss this with the agency and they insist that the scope of work they have developed is appropriate for their program needs. Can I complete the assignment and be in USPAP compliance? Response: the answer to both questions is the same. It is the appraiser's responsibility to determine and perform the appropriate scope of work. The scope of work performed in the assignment must be disclosed in the report. However, USPAP does not address disclosure of the client's role in determining the scope of work. Direction from the client on the scope of work is acceptable only if the appraiser is able to develop credible assignment results. If the scope of work specified by the client does not allow the development of credible assignment results, the appraiser must either A. obtain the client's agreement for an appropriate scope of work, or B. withdraw from the assignment. Number 190. Appraising large groups of similar or like items. Question: when an appraiser is asked to value a significantly large group of similar or like items, does USPAP require that the appraiser follow Standard 5 for mass appraisals? Response: no. USPAP does not require that Standard 5 be followed in such cases. Mass appraisal, for which performance standards are addressed in Standard 5, is an appraisal method. USPAP does not dictate the use of any particular method or technique in any particular assignment or under any particular set of circumstances. While mass appraisal methods may be helpful in the appraisal of large numbers of similar assets, whether its use is appropriate in a particular assignment would depend on such things as assignment conditions, the intended use of the appraisal results, and at times, agreement with the client. Number 191. Blockage, discount, and Standard 5. Question: is there any connection between the application of Standard 5 for mass appraisals and the application of a blockage discount? Response: no. There is no connection between the application of mass appraisal methods as addressed in Standard 5 and the application of a blockage discount. A blockage discount may be applicable when the appraisal problem being addressed indicates an assumption that a large number of similar assets would be offered for sale on the market at once. Under some circumstances, this would create an oversupply, which would depress the value of the assets. Whether the application of a blockage discount is appropriate depends on many factors, including the intended use of the appraisal, the type and definition of value, the conditions of the assignment, and the relevant characteristics of the assets. Relevant characteristics include the nature of the assets, their market, and other factors. Number 192, calculating blockage discount. Question: does USPAP offer guidance in how to calculate an appropriate blockage discount? Response: no. USPAP focuses on appraisal standards, not appraisal methodology or how to perform calculations. USPAP does require that an appraiser be competent. See the competency rule, and states in Standards Rule 1-1A and the other development standards that an appraiser must. Page 269. Be aware of, understand, and correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques that are necessary to produce a credible appraisal. Number 193, business valuation using asset-based cost approach. Question: I am valuing a controlling interest in a business enterprise by use of an asset-based cost approach, and that business owns real property. Am I required to have an appraisal of the real property, or may I use other indications of the real property value? Response: an appraisal of the real property would not always be required. Whether or not an appraisal is necessary is based on whether credible assignment results could be developed for the business interest without such an appraisal, and whether or not assignment results are credible is measured in the context of the intended use of those assignment results. The decision is part of the scope of work determination the business appraiser must make. For some intended uses, a business appraiser may determine that a real property appraisal performed by an appraiser competent to perform the appraisal in compliance with USPAP is required. For other intended uses, the business appraiser may determine that an indication of the real property value other than a real property appraisal may be appropriate. Such indications could be a management estimate, a recent transaction of the property, or tax assessment values. Number 194, allocation of value opinions. I often perform real property appraisal assignments that include not only real property, but also personal property and/or intangible items. Examples include property types such as hotels and restaurants. Oftentimes, my clients will request that I separate or allocate a portion of the defined value opinion to these non-real property components. These requests raise the following 4 questions. Question number 1. What exactly are the appraiser's USPAP obligations in performing this separation of value? Question number 2. May this allocation be accomplished without the appraiser developing an opinion of value in compliance with standards 7 or 9? Question number 3. Is an allocation considered to be synonymous with an opinion of value, or is it the result of a mathematical calculation? Question number 4. There are also occasions when the client does not specifically request separate valuations of non-real property assets, even though they may be present. Is the appraiser still required to value those assets separately? Response. Standards Rule 1-2E requires an appraiser to identify the characteristics of the property that are relevant to the type and definition of value and intended use of the appraisal, including Roman numeral 3, any personal property, trade fixtures, or intangible items that are not real property but are included in the appraisal. Standards Rule 1-4G states, end of page.